The engines were steady at 18,000 feet, a deep, synchronized roar cutting through the frozen air over the Pacific. Then static. Leader to formation. Check heading, repeat, check heading. The signal crackled. Faded. Gone. Below them, nothing but endless ocean. No landmarks. No second chances. Inside the cockpit, gloved hands tightened around the controls. Fuel gauges dipped lower than expected. The navigator frowned. Something wasn't right. A single miscalculation. A minor error. Barely noticeable. But in war, small mistakes don't stay small. They multiply. They spread. And sometimes, they erase entire fleets from the sky. Because what happened next wasn't caused by enemy fire, flak bursts, or interceptors. It was something far more dangerous. Something invisible. A tiny error that doomed them all. The horizon should have been there by now. At 19,000 feet, the world curved gently beneath them, but there was nothing. No island chain. No coastline. No target. Only a pale blue void stretching into infinity. Inside the lead aircraft, the navigator rechecked his calculations for the third time. Pencil marks scratched across the map, lines drawn, erased, redrawn. Wind drift, ground speed, heading correction. Everything looked right, but everything felt wrong. A sudden burst of static cut through the headset. Anyone have visual confirmation? Over. No answer. The formation had begun to spread. Not by command, but by uncertainty. Each pilot trusting his instruments, but questioning them at the same time. The engines droned louder now, not because they had changed but because the silence around them had deepened. Even the sky felt empty. Fuel consumption ticked upward. Small discrepancies at first, then enough to notice. A crewman leaned toward the cockpit. We're burning faster than planned. The pilot didn't respond immediately. His eyes stayed locked ahead, scanning a horizon that refused to reveal anything. Somewhere out there, there had to be land. There had to be. But doubt had entered the aircraft now. And once it did, it spread faster than any fire. Another radio call. More static. Then a voice, tight, controlled, but unmistakably strained. Navigator, confirm our position. Now. Pause. Too long. The kind of pause that no one wanted to hear. Because in that silence, the truth was forming. They weren't where they thought they were. Not even close. And the worst part? They had no idea where they actually were. Hundreds of miles from base. Hundreds of miles from target. Alone, in the largest battlefield on Earth. The sky offered no answers. The ocean offered no mercy. And the instruments, their only guide, had already betrayed them. Because somewhere hours earlier, a single number had been wrong. A tiny correction had been missed. A calculation, so small it seemed insignificant, had quietly rewritten their fate. And now, with fuel running low and time running out, that error was no longer small. It was fatal. Why this aircraft mattered. By 1942, the Pacific War had transformed into a vast, unforgiving battlefield stretching across thousands of miles of open ocean. Control of the skies wasn't just important, it was everything. Long-range bombers became the backbone of strategic warfare. Aircraft like the consolidated B-24 Liberator were designed for exactly this purpose. Distance. Range that no fighter could match. Payloads capable of crippling enemy infrastructure. And endurance missions that could last over 10 hours. These aircraft weren't just machines. They were floating lifelines. They connected isolated bases, struck deep behind enemy lines, and projected power across an ocean where ships alone couldn't dominate. But this reliance came with a hidden vulnerability. Navigation. Out here there were no roads. No visible borders. No second chances if you got lost. Just sky and sea. 2. Technical advantages, built for the impossible. The aircraft at the center of this disaster was engineered for extremes. It had a range exceeding 2,000 miles, heavy bomb capacity capable of devastating targets, multiple defensive gun positions for protection against fighters, high-altitude performance to evade anti-aircraft fire. Its 4 engines allowed it to stay airborne even when damaged. Its long wings gave it unmatched efficiency over vast distances. And its role was critical: long-range reconnaissance, bombing runs, and strategic supply disruption. But all that power depended on one fragile variable: accuracy. Not in weapons. Not in engines. In navigation. A slight deviation in heading. A misread wind correction. A tiny mathematical miscalculation. At this scale, it meant everything. 3. Combat story, the mission that went wrong. The mission was routine, on paper. A formation of bombers lifted off from a remote Pacific airstrip just before dawn. Their objective: locate and strike a Japanese position hundreds of miles away. Weather conditions were marginal, winds unpredictable. Still they pushed forward. Climbing to operational altitude, the formation settled into its course. Engines steady. Instruments checked. Then the problem began. A navigational calculation, likely a wind drift error, shifted their course by just a few degrees. A few degrees. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. But over hundreds of miles. It became catastrophic. Hours passed. Fuel burned faster than expected. Land never appeared. The ocean stretched endlessly beneath them. Radio chatter turned tense. Navigator, confirm position. Silence. Recalculations began mid-flight. Maps were rechecked. Bearings adjusted. But it was too late. They weren't just off course. They were lost. Completely. One by one, fuel gauges dropped toward empty. Engines began to sputter. And then, the first aircraft went down. Not from enemy fire. Not from mechanical failure. But from exhaustion. The others followed. Ditching into open ocean, scattered across hundreds of miles. Some crews survived the crash. Many didn't survive what came after. For enemy perspective, the invisible advantage. From the Japanese side, there was no dramatic interception. No air battle. No victory announcement. Because they never saw it happen. And that was the terrifying reality. An enemy didn't need to shoot you down, if the environment could do it for them. The vast Pacific was a weapon in itself. And navigation errors turned it into a silent executioner. For opposing forces, this reinforced a brutal truth. Long-range bombers were powerful, but fragile. Their greatest strength, distance, was also their greatest weakness. 5. Strategic impact. Lessons written in loss. This incident wasn't just a tragedy, it was a turning point. It exposed a critical flaw in early war operations. Navigation systems were not reliable enough for extreme-range missions. In response, major changes followed. Improved training for navigators, better dead reckoning techniques, introduction of advanced radio navigation systems, greater emphasis on formation coordination and redundancy. The war forced innovation. Mistakes forced evolution. And the cost of learning was measured in lives. Because in the skies over the Pacific, there was no margin for error. Not even a tiny one. As the situation deteriorated, discipline began to fracture. Not from panic, but from conflicting decisions. Some crews chose to alter course independently, hoping to rediscover land by breaking formation. Others stayed rigidly on the original heading, trusting that the error could still be corrected. This divergence only made things worse. Without a unified bearing, the formation dissolved into isolated aircraft, each now facing the full weight of the Pacific alone. Dead reckoning, the primary navigation method, depended heavily on estimated wind speeds and directions. But high-altitude winds were notoriously unpredictable. A misjudgment of even 10 knots could push an aircraft dozens of miles off course over time. And here, the error had compounded for hours. The navigators worked frantically, plotting, replotting, cross-checking against fuel consumption, sun position, and estimated drift. But there was no fixed reference point, no radio beacon, no visual confirmation, only educated guesses, growing less reliable by the minute. Then came the moment every aircrew feared. Fuel critical. One aircraft reported it first. Then another. And another. The tone over the radio shifted, not to panic, but to grim acceptance. Ditching procedures were reviewed mid-air. Life rafts checked. Loose equipment secured. Each crew now preparing not for combat, but for impact. And below them the ocean waited, cold, vast, and indifferent. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was survival against time, distance, and the consequences of a single, uncorrected mistake. The ocean never gave them back. No wreckage fields. No battlefield memorials. Just coordinates on a map, and silence. Their mission wasn't remembered for destruction. It was remembered for disappearance. For the brutal realization that in modern warfare, survival depended on more than courage or firepower. It depended on precision, on numbers, on calculations made under pressure in cramped cockpits, with lives hanging on every decimal point. These aircrews weren't defeated in combat. They were defeated by distance, by isolation, by a mistake so small, it was almost invisible. Yet its consequences were absolute. In the years that followed, aviation would evolve. Navigation would become more precise. Technology would close the gaps that once swallowed entire squadrons whole. But the lesson remained. War doesn't always announce itself with explosions. Sometimes, it whispers through a compass needle, drifting just slightly off course. And by the time you realize it, there's no land left to return to. Only sky, only sea, and the echo of engines, fading into nothing. In the aftermath, the reports were clinical. Coordinates estimated. Fuel exhaustion cited. Navigation error listed as the primary cause. Clean, precise, detached. But those words couldn't capture what really happened out there. They couldn't describe the moment a pilot realizes the horizon will never change. They couldn't reflect the weight of silence when radios go unanswered, or the quiet understanding between crew members, when everyone knows the outcome but no one says it out loud. For the families back home, there were no clear answers. No final messages. No confirmed locations. Just the slow, heavy arrival of uncertainty, followed by loss. And for the military, the lesson cut deep. War had entered a new phase, one where technology extended reach beyond natural limits. But human systems, human calculations, had not yet caught up. The sky had become larger than their ability to navigate it. And until that gap was closed, the risk remained absolute. In time, advancements would come. Radio navigation would improve. Radar would evolve. Celestial navigation would be refined to near perfection. Later, entirely new systems would emerge, ones that could pinpoint position anywhere on Earth with near-zero margin of error. But those innovations were built on sacrifice, on missions that failed, on crews that never returned. Because progress in war is rarely born from success. It is carved out of mistakes, studied, analyzed, and remembered. This was one of those mistakes. A quiet one, an invisible one, but one that reshaped how wars would be fought in the skies forever. Today, when aircraft cross oceans in hours, guided by satellites and systems beyond human error, it's easy to forget just how unforgiving the world once was. How a single miscalculation could erase entire formations. How distance itself could become the deadliest enemy. And how the line between mission success and total loss could be measured in degrees, fractions, decimals. Because in that moment, high above an empty ocean, there were no enemies in sight, no explosions, no gunfire, just a drifting heading, a fading signal, and a fleet of aircraft slowly disappearing into history, not with a roar, but with silence.